I got into this segmenting probably, I don't know, a year and a half ago when I got a lathe. And I initially just was going to do solid wood bowls, and then I saw a picture of a segmented bowl and thought that'd be fun to make. So I kind of got into that. I also was doing like these kind of things, and what I would use these for, and I meant to bring one, but I didn't. And that was make little jewelry boxes out of them for the tops. And the way to come up with a pattern is obviously you can get a grid off the internet for 5/8, 3/4, quarter inch, whatever grid you want. That's the easiest way to do it rather than sitting there and drawing it out on paper. And then once you come up with a pattern, I go something like this, and this is what I did for the for this eagle on here. Actually, it's like a Thunderbird. And you just build the layers according to your plan, each layer across. And I got pictures of the jigs that I used to glue these up. And the other thing I did, like on this one, is I slipped a little piece of veneer in between each one, just to give it a little bit more character. So I'm going to put the next one. And this is just like what a plan would be. It isn't anything that I have here. Actually, I've never made that one yet. So it's just what you do. So come up with an idea.
Flip your mic to your shirt. Flip your mic to your shirt.
This one?
No, that one goes to the camera.
Oh, this one here?
The other one, yeah.
Didn't realize I was holding it. How's that?
Yeah.
Is that better? Okay. Yeah, any ideas? You know, I get a lot of ideas off the internet, in books. I got that book there that I get ideas out of. Actually, like this bowl here, there's one very similar to it in there. I changed it up a little bit, size-wise and whatnot. So, and we'll get into how I make that. That's the jig that I use for making the individual rolls. It's just you come up with your pattern. If you pick your certain roll and lay out your boards. And on these here, I can use like regular Type Bond glue. Now when I start gluing the layers together, then I'll use white glue, just regular Elmer's white glue. Gives you a lot more open time, so it doesn't tack up on you. You can move things around and get them in alignment. And, you know, so what if it just takes another day? You wait a day to come back and put the next layer on. So there's always doing something else. You never have to wait for glue to dry. This is that block after it was done. I have a veneer press, and I have a picture of it coming up too that I clamp each layer together with. And to get like a 1/4 inch, if I glued this together, it's rough. And if I was to sand this down, then I wouldn't be 1/4 inch square anymore. So what I started out with is a piece that's 1/4 inch by 3/8. And then I was able to plane it down and sand it down to get down to a 1/4 inch square. When I first started doing it, I wasn't doing that, and my squares were not coming out square. They were coming out rectangular. So that's one of the things that I've done to make it better product. This was that's this box here, and this was actually the first block I ever made, and obviously there's no pattern to it. I just threw a bunch of wood together and experimented with it. And then I started to get into making patterns and things like this. This here eagle is, my plan is to make slide boxes like this, mostly with it. And I'll have to build the box to fit the lid. But that's my idea with that one there. And some of these ideas, like the Thunderbird, is incorporated into the segmented bowl turning. They do it a different way, and that also will come up a little bit in the process here. So. And that's what it called the blanket. It's an Indian blanket, and I'll show you how this is made. It's really not as difficult as it looks. I didn't count the pieces on here, but I believe there's 52 pieces in this one. I heard that on I think they read it in the book, or I have a video too that I have at home that I watch, and it's on there. Okay, this is how you go about it. Now these are not my work here. This is taken out of a book. I'm not so sure it was taken out of this book. I didn't have time to make one myself, so I took these pictures from the book. And you can pick out any angle you want. You know, generally, I think this was a 45-degree angle. Changing the angle changes the look. The width of the board also changes it. But you figure out your plan again and cut your pieces. And then you start gluing it up on a jig in the order that you had them laid out. And you want to make sure you get them in the order, otherwise you screw it all up if it's not in the right order, which is easy to do. And this is what it would look like all glued up. Each piece it's held together on the end with the C-clamp, and then each piece is pressed in with the clamp, the spring clamp, to really draw it in tight. And it's not a good time to be skimpy on glue, because you want that movement in there to slide around until they actually get tight together, and then they're nice and tight. And then you rip off the strips. You cut it in whatever width strips you've figured. Each one will be ripped at, say, 1/8 of an inch thick. And that's what they would look like after they're cut. And then all you got to do is flip each one over the opposite direction, and it makes that pattern. And then you would cut them in half, or cut off the sections, and then turn them around and glue them together, and you end up with the pattern like this. I use a table saw. Get a very sharp blade, and you know, when you're running it through, don't stop. Keep the material moving, because you don't want any burns. And just make sure everything's square. And I don't know, can you back up a little bit? See, now this one here, it has a carrier board, and it's masking tape on both top and bottom of it. So you're not actually cutting 1/8 of an inch from the fence. He's got like a 2-inch carrier board there, and that helps. Even with the tape on top and bottom, holds everything tight. The thing with that though is every time you make a cut, you gotta tape the next piece on what's left over and cut again, and then tape it and cut it, and that's a little time consuming, but it's not too bad. And if you cut a board, say, you know, if you have a piece of 24 inches long or something like that, and being that this is only like 6 or 8 inches, you can get 3 or 4 of these out of one of those setups. Okay, now let's get into that was all the flat work that I. Now the segmenting part with the bowl turning. I'm not very good at math. I never have been, but I learned how to use pi finally after all these years. Along with this plan here, and you can help yourself to these too. You figure out the circumference that you want to make the bowl, and with that you take that times pi, and then that gives you your length around the bowl. And if you want to make a 24-piece ring, you would divide that length by 24, and that would give you an angle, not your angle yet. You would take that angle and divide it in half, because each segment has an angle on both sides. And so on a 24-inch bowl, it comes out to 15 degrees. But then you would take that and divide it in half to 7.5 degrees, and that's where this jig would be set at, is 7.5 degrees. And that would give you a 24-piece rim or bowl. Yeah, this is a pattern. That's the football pattern. That's exactly what we got here. One thing that I wanted to explain. Here I got a piece that has this one here is 12 pieces, and this one is 24. Now it's a lot easier to turn a bowl out of this because it's more round, so to speak, than this. This has got a lot of flat area. So you're going to end up having a lot thinner wall with something like this than you would with this, unless you made these thicker. And then you're wasting wood too. So, you know, it's almost easier to make it with a lot more pieces in the ring than it is with less pieces. And this ring here is also 12. And when I made this bowl, I made one of these bowls. The original way I made it, when I had this at the top, it was so lopsided that I couldn't get this area cleaned up completely. So the best way to do it would be to make this a 24-piece ring rather than a 12-piece ring. And then I would be able to, it would be more round like this rather than like that. But I've changed the way I've done things so it's a little easier that I can use this kind of ring to where I don't get out of round by the time I get my whole thing built. All right, this is this jig here, and this here, as you can see, locks into the T-fence, and that's where you would adjust the T-fence to give you your length of segment. And this orange wedge, it looks yellow on there. I think this one's set up for 16 pieces per ring. And my idea on this one here is because if I build a bunch of jigs like this, all different angles, it takes up a lot of space. Where on this one here, if I just replace the wedge, then I'd only have the one jig, and I just have a bunch of wedges for the different angles that I want to cut. This is the only wedge that I've used on this one so far. I haven't messed with it enough to come up with different angles. And the way I go about getting the angles precise is I usually cut some MDF, say 3 to 4 inches wide, because it's stable. You know, when you cut a piece of wood, it goes this way or goes that way, but MDF won't. So I'll cut a ring, and then I'll fit it and see if I need to give it more angle or less angle. And then I got paper shims in here, and I'll take it out or add paper shims one way or the other. And, you know, it takes 3, 4, 5 times of cutting to get that precise angle. And even at that, it isn't really, by the time you cut wood itself, because the wood will move, when you do your glue ups, you still won't have a perfect fit. But I'll get into how we can solve that. That's a close-up of the same jig. I have it set up. I got a little wedge here so that the pieces fall away from the blade. This one here, it holds it in place until you're done. This one here, they fall apart, fall away, and they just kind of push them out of the way a little bit. It's a little bit more efficient than that one. This is the other jig. This comes off, and I got a little little two-phase tape on there to help hold it. And the way to get your size or your length is just to move this back and forth until you're zeroed in, and then to clamp that in place. But this one's stationary. This one won't move. I can put it back on the saw in a year from now, and it'll cut the same angle as it did today. And I use the calipers like that to figure out my length, and that coincides with what is on here. It doesn't have to be, you know, if I was looking for a piece that was 1.25 and I had that point 2.65, that'd be close enough. It'd be a little bit bigger ring, but it's probably close enough. It don't have to be right on the number. When you're gluing up segments, the little fuzzies on them, you got to take each one and sand them all off, because if you get a piece of fuzzy in between two of them, it's going to leave a gap in your joint. So you just pull up a chair and start sanding away, you know, get your little wood block out and just sand them all up, and then take a air hose or something and clean up your area that way.
Did you say your name was Job? Because you've got to be patient.
Yeah, it's tedious. the sanding.
You have to pick all those pieces up.
The sanding is tedious, you know. I mean, it's just, I don't like to sand. I don't know who does, but that part, and you know, you start sanding in little pieces, and pretty soon you're sanding your fingernail down, you know. So, okay, now we're getting into setting up a ring. I have a little board that I use, and I didn't bring it. One thing I didn't bring, but I just have a series of holes in rings, different sizes, and I put the little finish nails in there, and I use rubber bands, and that's just to kind of check the fit. And what it can do is you can take one nail out at a time as you work your way around, and that the ring won't go flying on you. Normally, it won't. It has before too. That's where it's you know, where you can check the fit. Now, some people do use just rubber bands for gluing up rings, and I have before, but generally I use these here, the hose clamps. They work really slick, and they work a lot better if you have one of these. But you don't want to tighten it all the way with this, because it'll flop on you. So I also have a socket that fits on there. I had to grind it down a little bit because the hose clamp, it's kind of a tight fit. The other thing with the hose clamps is there's a little ear on the bottom side of them, and sometimes that'll try and push your piece out of the way, push it down. So you got to make sure that you get them all in a good spot. So I can pass this one around. You guys can look at it. This isn't glued, but it isn't going to go anywhere either. Okay, now we're getting ready to glue it, and I'm only going to glue a half a ring at a time. Well, I'm going to glue the whole ring, but it's going to be two halves. And the reason for the two halves is if there's any discrepancy in the angles, if they're off just a hair, by doing only half at a time, it'll glue it where the glue is, it'll glue it all tight, and then I'll end up with two half rings. And when you put them two half rings together after the glue's dry, they won't be a perfect angle. It won't just put it together. It just won't happen. No matter how, even that one going around, they look really tight, but if I was to glue that up, it wouldn't, I'd have to adjust it to make it right. And once again, you don't spare the glue. You just you want it to slip around. You want it to move till you get everything where you want. Now we're getting into where I fix my angles if they're not right. I got a carrier board, and I put that up against the T-fence, and I put paper shims on the carrier board so that my ring is hanging out over the edge of it. That way, when I turn it around, I'll turn it around and I'll cut it off on the table saw, and then I'll have a square edge on both half of the rings. And then there's where I'm going to cut it off on the table saw. And you're just taking enough just to clean up the edge. You don't want to take too much, because otherwise your piece will show that it looks different size.
Holding that down with double-faced tape?
I use hot glue.
Hot glue.
Yeah, I'll use hot glue. It really doesn't show there, but I'll 3 or 4 dabs in the middle and 4 or 5 on the outside, and then I'll just, when it's done, I'll just take a chisel and pop it off. And that carrier board, I'll use that over and over and over and over and over, because I have 2 of them, 1 for each half, and I'll just run them through. And that's my drying rack. I happened to have a bunch of rings there the other day, and I looked at it and I thought, yeah, okay, that's where I hang them a lot. Now we're going to start building it. And the base, this base, actually these 2 bases, I've made half rings out of these. And then I was using what I want to say, it was like a biscuit type bit for a slot cutter for my router. And I was cutting the slot into half rings. Well, it was kind of dangerous, because you're hanging onto the little ring and pushing it into that slot cutter. It just wasn't a good idea. So it worked, but it wasn't the best idea in the world. And you can use a solid bottom, and some people do. I haven't yet on a larger bottom, because the wood will expand and contract, and you got a lot of joints there, and to me it could pop it apart. Where if you use a floating base, you don't have to worry about that expansion. And so what I'll do is I'll get that's also hot glued on the lathe, on my platform on my lathe. And I'll flatten that with the tool. I'll get all the roughness out of it with the tool. And then I got a sandpaper on a sanding block on a piece of MDF. And I'll put pencil marks. I'll get the lathe going and run a pencil on it, and then I'll sand it, and I'll see where the pencil marks are still showing. And if I have to, I'll go back and clean it up with the chisel again on the lathe. Otherwise, I'll just sand it until the pencil marks are all gone. Then it's flat. And then you got to do the same thing with the wood block itself, the waste block. You got to flatten it. I do it the same way.
With hot glue?
No, that is actually screwed into a chuck. And then I'll glue the first ring will get glued right to that. And make sure you make your wood block, make sure you make your waste block big enough. Because when I was doing this one, when I got down to the end, I was only hanging on by a 1/16 all the way around. I was really shocked when I did that. I thought, wow, I got lucky. So make sure it's big enough. That's my veneer press that I use. I got one in there gluing up.
What size bolts are those, or rods?
They're just threaded rods, the long threaded rods.
How big around?
What is that? No, that's only about 1/2 inch, I think. The real pressure is only in the middle, and that is a 3/4 inch threaded rod. And I don't have it on there, but I also have, it's a real fine thread, which a lot of them are the coarse threads. So I have a big socket on top, and I'll put the drill up there and run it up and down with a drill. It's a 2-inch chunk of white oak on the bottom, and the rest of it's just plywood. And then I had a welder make the metal parts of it, the screw parts. I got that off the internet too. I saw a picture one day and I thought, well, I got to make one of those. So A lot of things on the internet. YouTube is a great place to find information. Okay, yeah, we glued on the first block. Now it's on the lathe. Yeah, that's the waste block in the middle there. And what I don't show is I cut a rabbet on the inside of this one. You'll kind of see it later. And that's where the bottom fits into, is the rabbet. And I cut it, I get my piece that I want in the bottom, and I figure that thickness, and then I'll cut the rabbet to about that thickness. So, and there you can see it, this is setting in a rabbet, and that's flat across there. Because when I put the next piece on there, I don't want the base piece to interfere with my layers. The other thing you do is you stagger the seams like a bricklayer effect. Keep the seams apart from each other. That way it gives it more strength. If you have two seams together, it's more likely to give out. I've done it before where I've had two seams together, but not too often. So now I got the glue on there for the next ring, and I moved it away from the inner part so it didn't seep into it and lock my floating base in place. I wanted to squeeze outward, not inward. Now I got little register blocks there. I've hot glued them to what I do is if this is my base, I will take it just manually and line it up where I like it. And then I'll mark it with a pencil, and then I'll hot glue these blocks in place around it. Because if I didn't put them blocks in there and then I go tighten it down in my veneer press, it would slide all over because of the glue slippery. And them little blocks will help hold it in place, so you know that you're close to center. Okay. There it shows my little pencil line lining up the two. One thing is it's kind of important to keep your rings as round as possible. I've found that if I take too much off when I'm trying to clean up my lines, my joints, if I get kind of an oval shape, it doesn't line up very well with the ring. If you got another ring that's round, they just don't line up very well. Now what I do is I turn just enough to round everything off, balance it out. I don't want to take too much because I want to leave as much as possible to glue onto the next ring. And there I got the next ring on, and I've got my blocks in place so everything doesn't slide out. It's nice to see that glue hanging out like that. That's a good thing to see. That's the next ring. I didn't have space for the blocks on that one, the register blocks, so I just kind of kept tweaking it until I got it in place. And in case you're wondering, we're making this bowl here. I didn't say that, but this is the bowl that I made off of this. Now we're going to do the ring, and those are the two types of glue-ups I needed for that. And that's what without the spacers, I goofed up. I didn't put the spacers in here after I got it glued up, so I'll use this somewhere along the way. I'll make another bowl and use this, so it's not a total loss. And that's where I cut the spacers for that. It's not trapped between the fence and the blade. I have a space in there. You can see I got a spacer on the end. Another thing is you want to try and keep the grain all running together. See, I'm cutting that off the end grain of the board. That way the grain's running all the same way. You don't have any cross-grain situations. You can get by with it in small areas, but try to keep the grain going all the same way. If you really looked at like this bowl, the grain's all running the same way. And that's the glue up. I'm going to attempt to do that with this one here. Well, after a bit, we'll glue this one up. Back up one. Oh, you went forward. Can you back up? Back up. Back up. There you go. Okay. See at the down at the bottom, I'm missing the little spacer. Okay. And the reason for that is when I go to true it up on my table saw, I don't want that spacer in there because I'd be truing up the spacer and that would change the size of the spacer. I want to change the size of the segment if I'm going to change anything. And you know, we're just taking off a hair anyway, but it would show if it was the spacer rather than the segment itself. Okay. Now I'm a proud grandpa. We had 2 grandchildren in 7-8 days. That's my wife and her son's little one, and the other one was my daughter's little one. And now we got it all glued up. See, I can't wait for the ink to dry, or the ink. I was a printer, and I still am, but the glue. I can't wait for the glue to dry. It's, you know, turn on the lathe and it starts flying everywhere, but got to turn it, you know. Got to go. And that's my wife's hand. She would hold it on the bowl. I don't have a steady rest yet, so she would hold it on there to take away the vibration when you're out on the end and it's getting kind of thin. It wants to vibrate. And that's where it's turned, all done, as far as the inside and outside. I get to finishing the bottom. And what I like to do, I've done on these 2 bowls, this one and this one, is I've just been using sanding sealer. And I'll put a coat of sanding sealer on it, and it dries in half hour, 45 minutes, hour. And then I'll lightly sand it and put another coat on, and I'll go 7, 8, 9 coats over the course of 2 or 3 days. And then when I'm all done, before I turn the bottoms, I'll get that printing press, lathe running at about 2,500, and I'll brown paper bag it. I'll put a brown paper bag on there and just really take the shine up and smooth it out. And I really like that finish. It isn't very durable because it's only sanding sealer. If you want to do, you could put on polyurethane and get close, but I just really like that shine. It doesn't leave fingerprints or anything like that I've noticed. You know, if you're going to eat popcorn out of it a lot, you might want to use something a little more durable rather than, you know, polyurethane would be good. Now I'm parting it off. And then we just finish the bottom. We just turn that down. And one of the reasons I kind of went that different direction with the floating base is this one here was made with the method that's being passed around. And it's starting to fall apart here. And what happened is I got too thin. And we use this for popcorn all the time, and then you just wash it with a wet cloth and stuff, but the water still get in there. And this one here is a lot thinner than what this one is. This one won't do that because I left it thicker. And it's easier to do it this way than it is this way as far as the thickness. So I brought this along because it's a screw up in a sense. But I'll put it back on the lathe and try and fix it and maybe put a new bottom on it and whatnot. And that's the done bowl. Now we get into a bowl from a board. I don't know, some of you are familiar with that, I think. These here 4 are done that way. These 2 are the same wood. It's just a different angle, and they look completely different. Not completely, but somewhat. And that bowl down there was done on the same idea as a bowl from a board. And that bowl was only made from 16 pieces like this, 8 of each, aside from the base and the top rim. And they were actually only this size also. These are actually leftover pieces. And this one here would have been the next one up. And then I had another one yet that would have been made bigger yet, the top one. But I knocked it off and broke it. And I just felt like this was getting too big for me to handle, so I stopped at that point. But this was a leftover ring from it. It'll break if you drop it. That's okay, I'll never use it on anything. Yeah, you just cut the half rings, determine the bandsaw angle, whether it's 30, 35, 40, whatever. On the big bowl, I changed the angle on every cut to kind of give it a little bit more slope. You are limited on your, more like a funnel shape, more than a bowl. And they're really not good for much, just to look at. They look nice. What's that?
I thought it was lamp shape.
Well, a lot of people have picked this bowl up and they go like this. My brother did that. I about shot him. He was throwing the thing all over the place. I wasn't happy with him. He don't touch it anymore. Okay, on to the next one. That's this bowl here. This is actually the first one I ever did. I just went into it. One thing on this is you can feel a glue line here. And I think what happened is the wood continued to shrink, but the glue didn't. So it showed up that you can feel the glue. So it probably wasn't completely, the wood probably wasn't completely dry yet. And that's what this is right here. These are some of the bowls I've made. This was out of southern yellow pine. It was just skid lumber for where I worked. It's just scraps. This was another skid lumber. I don't know if you're familiar with what beetle bark is. It was a disease out in Colorado, out west, and it turned the pine blue, but it didn't affect the wood any. And when I put finish on it, it turned green. So this is another one, cherry and walnut. There's 73 pieces in that one. That one's maple iroko, which is African teak, and mahogany. I think it was mahogany. It looked like it. It was harder than nails. I don't know if mahogany's hard or not. That I don't know, but it was really hard wood. But I called it mahogany. Had 161. This one here I sold to a guy, and that's the ring I'm passing around. This is identical. I made two of them at that time. That one went bouncing across the floor once. Wasn't too happy about that. Here's that bowl, the previous bowl when it's ready to go. Now this was before I started turning each ring to center them up. I built the whole thing and then I threw it on the lathe and the outside rim was going like this. And I'm like, God, how am I going to turn a bowl with that thing? So then I started doing each level at a time and truing it up and then mounting the next ring on it. And that way I stay true from top to bottom. And that's this one here. And there's actually another ring here. This was the first ring I made, and I wasn't real happy with it. If you look around, I'll pass it around, but they're not all the same size. Some of the Purple Heart got pretty thin on one side to the other, and I didn't want to make a bowl with that because it really shows. So I made another ring, and it turned out a lot better. That is these two bowls, and the reason I have these is I just made two sets of rings. They were the exact same when they started out, but I made them thick enough so that you could turn different shapes with the same rings, just to show that you can change the shape if you want. If you make your rings thicker, and I think they were about like this kind of ring. And off of that, you can make different looks. Now these are just some things that other people have done. I I like to try and keep mine simple if I can. It's simple. It really isn't that hard. I don't even know how to go about making these kind of designs. But I just thought I'd show you some of the possibilities. Some of the people do amazing things. They really do. And there's the Thunderbird thing. That's kind of along the same lines as this here pattern. It's made the same way. And this Malcolm Tibbetts is probably the most well-known segmenter person. He just does phenomenal things. And this is all turned on. I mean, obviously he didn't turn that piece on the lathe, but individually it's all bowls that he's done. He's done a piece with over 10,000 pieces in it or something like that. I forget what the number was. But it's just astounding, the things he does. I don't know what time, 7:45. Well, let's glue up a ring quick. We'll do that. The football, it's just the same bowl on two halves, okay? I just turned two bowls and glued them together. That's all this is. It's really not that hard to do. This was actually more work than the football. The only thing with the football, I talked about two ring seams being together, is I had to put another little ring in the middle, a spacer, to get that bricklayer effect all the way through. Otherwise, it's just, you could crack it in half and have two bowls. So it's and it's, it's not a complicated pattern like this. It was really. It really wasn't that. The making the threads was harder than the bowl itself. So I don't know how much you guys will be able to see. And I just took the football and made marks on it and drew my plan off the football to get the plan for it. So. I'll try not to make too big a mess on the table. Normally when you do this, you get everything all ready beforehand. Make sure your size is close and whatnot. Get everything in place. Now, as I said, I want to take two of these out across from each other. There it is. And I got two little dowels that I'll use for spacers in here. And that'll keep my two halves. And so when I cinch that all up, that'll lock any of my gaps. That'll take care of all my gaps on the two halves. And I have to think about this for a minute. I've only done this once before, And I'm not going to need these right now. In my way, anyway. I'll put these in as I go around gluing it. And I just take, I've already sanded them down, got rid of all the fuzzies, and I'll just take one of the pieces and dab it in there, and just rub the glue on there like that. And then the next one. On these I have to glue both sides because of the extra piece. On a normal one I just do one of the two halves.
You're not going to put glue on the little pieces.
What's that?
You're not going to put glue on the little pieces.
Right. Yeah, I'll just slide them in place. I gotta remember where halfway is too. Gotta backtrack a little bit. Now I glued one I shouldn't have, so I will, yeah, I'll be all right. We'll do half of it. Now I'll put the spacers in half of it. It can get messy, but it's not too bad. Okay, that's half of it. So now we'll start, here we go. You want to get as good a coverage as you can get, and guess I can't say it enough, but don't be shy about wasting a little glue, because I don't want this to be tacking up yet on that side, because I still got to move it around. Not having a lot of luck here at the moment. Okay, all my pieces are in place, I believe. And I like to get these dowels in the middle centered up somewhat. And just kind of work it around. And where's Bob Hewitt at? Remember that day you called me and I told you I had to glue up? Does that sound familiar? I think I was gluing up that ring. Yeah, you should always shut your phone off when you're doing something like this. And they just go around, tighten them all up, just make sure they're snug. And that's that.
Do you have your segments all numbered, so they stay in one order?
What's that?
Have the segments all numbered?
You can. I don't. I haven't gotten into it that much. Some people will cut the wood and not, when you cut segments, you can flip the board every other time, every other cut to make the maximum out of it. But if you have a particular piece of wood that has a really nice grain, you can cut it so that the same side is on the outside of the bowl every time, and then they would number it so that the grain follows around the bowl. But I haven't gotten into anything like that. Like I said, I like to keep things a little simple, and I got other things I like to do, and I just once in a while I go, well, make a bowl. So there. And now, see, now this piece didn't get in all the way, which isn't really a good thing, because by the time I flatten it, then it's not going to be, the lengths will be different size, but that's what it is. You can't take it apart now.
Question. When you're putting those together then, and you're getting glue on the surface there, not just on the ends where it's glued up, but on the flat surface, you have to really be careful to make sure you don't have your glue up because of it.
Well, I'll go back.
It's not going to bond for that.
No, I'll go back and flatten it and take all that off at the lathe.
Okay.
I'll flatten every ring. Every ring will get flattened, so that and that'll all get removed. Yeah. So yeah, you can be as messy as you want, because eventually, 90% of that wood will be taken away, 80 to 90%. What's that?
Both sides of the ring before you glue up separately.
Yeah. There's different ways to flatten it. Yeah, some people have thickness sanders, and they can flatten them that way. I have a thickness sander, but I find this is better. My thickness sander will round the edges a little bit, and I find that doing it on the lathe flattening is more effective. You mean like a thickness sander? Yeah, you can, but my thickness sander will leave rounded edges. What's that? Yeah, on the outside edge here it'll round it off. Yeah, I put them on. I put a bunch on a carrier board before, and if you have multiple rings, you can put one inside the other, and run them through a thickness sander all at the same time. You hot glue them in place, and it's time saver. But I just found that flattening it on the lathe is better for me. The zigzag bowl, this here pattern, that's just made off of this board here. You got to do a series of cuts, and it's been so long since I've done it. you got to cut them at an angle, and then you glue it back together, and then you cut it again, and then you cut your angles on. It's really a simple process. It's just you take your time and figure it out. They say YouTube is great. If you want to learn something, go to YouTube. That's about it. I really can't think of much else. Any questions?